Hello there guys, this is Christie from Dostoevsky in Space. Today I'm going to be talking about my very favorite reads of 2022. So without further ado, let's get into it. I also am very excited because I just got news from my work that they got my microphone working with my work laptop, which means I should have a microphone again here very soon. So this is going to be an unedited video though, because my laptop is actually still at IT along with my microphone. But hopefully for my next video, I'll be able to have my setup back, which will be very exciting. So anyways, moving on. So my favorite books of 2022 that I read. So I'm just not gonna go in any sort of order here. I'm just gonna kind of pick books up off of my pile. So In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park, I'm gonna talk about first. This is a memoir of a North Korean defector who was from a lower class than the other North Korean defector that I read about this year. And so Yeonmi Park is from, I think she said from a northern, more rural area of North Korea. So, and that means she's different from a lot of the defectors who were initially coming forward out of North Korea. And there just was a flood of people who were starving coming from her area, mostly women and teenagers, girls, because they were brought across the border by sex traffickers. And that is what happened to her and her mother. And it's very intense. They have to survive a lot in China, and they finally make it to the US. Actually, they finally make it to South Korea, and eventually Yeonmi Park makes it to the US and goes to Columbia University, and then she becomes a speaker. And she isn't always given the opportunity to speak on every kind of platform, which is a shame because of her politics. She has a very strong view of politics because of where she came from. She's very sensitive to feeling like she's being brainwashed. And so she had a really bad reaction to some elements of the West. And so I've watched every interview I can find with her. I think she's fascinating, and I love hearing everything she has to say. She's a really eloquent speaker, I think. And I just really loved this. I read this physically, the whole thing, and it was just so fascinating because she gets into the history of North Korea and the leaders and how it was propped up by the Soviet Union and China for so many years. And so it did well for a while and everybody was happy in North Korea. But then when the Soviet Union collapsed and China also had to change its economic policies, she described the disorder, chaos, and starvation that descended upon North Korea without getting that foreign aid. And so, yeah, it's really, really heartbreaking and fascinating. I loved this. So, and then the other book by a North Korean defector that I read, also equally life-changing sort of read. I've become a memoir person this year. And that one was The Girl with Seven Names by Hyeonseo Lee. And so she was from an upper class family, and so she lived on. Both of these girls lived in border towns. So the reason Yeonmi Park decided to try going into China was because she could see that they always had lights on, whereas in North Korea, she frequently did not have electricity. And she could smell the food from across the river, and so she knew that they were eating more than she was. They were starving. They thought eggs were the fanciest food that you could eat. They never had protein, and literally it was, she knew that she was going to be sex trafficked after she got into China because immediately she and her mother were raped. And she decided, I'm going to choose this as long as I don't starve, because starving is worse. That's what she talks about. So in the case of Hyeonseo Lee, she actually came from a more upper class family, and so it was harder, I think, for them to decide to leave because they were surviving in North Korea, even though so much of it was terrible. They had enough to eat, unlike families like Hyeonseo Lee's families. So unlike families like Yeonmi Park's family. So Anyways, Hyeonseo Lee, she escaped into China as a teenager. Like, she just wanted to, she was being like a rebellious teenager, and she just wanted to go visit her family in China. And then she was never able to actually go back into North Korea because they found out, people in North Korea found out that she was gone, and so her family was in political trouble because of her running away, so she could never return. And so she had a lot of really interesting things to say about particularly South Korea when she made it there. It's just very difficult for North Koreans in South Korea because so many South Koreans are like highly educated, very career focused. And if you're coming from North Korea, you're not prepared for any of that, even though South Korea gives them a lot of aid. So it was very interesting hearing Yeonmi Park's description of South Korea from her eyes as a North Korean defector. And it was very interesting hearing Yeonmi Park's reaction to the free world, because they were very different reactions. And they have their own stories to tell, both of them, and I just thought both of them were amazing. So the other one was The Girl with Seven Names by Hyeonseo Lee, and her journey, she, as suggested by the title, had to change her identity over and over again because she stayed in China for quite a long time, and it's illegal to be a defector in China. China will just send you back, so that, and you get put into a labor camp in North Korea. They do not help defectors. It's against the law there to help a defector or to be a defector, and they will just send you back to North Korea. So both girls were really put into very difficult situations because of that policy in China. And so it was really just heartbreaking to hear their stories, how nobody would help them. Like, I mean, Hyeonseo Lee had more help because she had family there, whereas Yeonmi Park really had to make her own way. And they both had a lot of friends who didn't make it. So it was very, very like sad, but really intense, really good stories, like to really drag you into the details of their experience and their thoughts about their experience. Really, their thoughts on their experience were so different because their experiences were different. So anyways, so good. And I also read North and South in early months in 2022, and this was the first time that I listened to this or read it. So I listened to it, and then my friend Joanna, who is one of my Bible study buddies on Zoom, she sent me this copy, and I was just so grateful. So this follows, so it's about the differences between the North and the South in England during this time. So it's a Victorian classic, and the really fun thing about it, the really fun thing about it is that the main female protagonist and the main male protagonist, who they have like a hate to love relationship, like actually they do. It's not just a trope that's being thrown out there. They actually really do hate each other at first. The man is a mill owner, and the woman is like very focused on the labor because she sees the workers and how they're suffering in their conditions. And so them working out that labor issue together was like really gripping. That was like really gripping romance for me. So this is a very serious book. And people compare it to Pride and Prejudice, and I guess it's sort of like that because that's also hate to love. But this one, it doesn't just take place in drawing rooms. You see more of the grit and hardship of the lower classes in this one. And it's not like a witty repartee type book. It's definitely more of a we're gonna argue about things that matter type book. Not that Jane Austen's society stuff doesn't matter, but this has like a more serious tone, and it just like really fit my personality personally better. So I would say it's like a more serious book than the Jane Austen books, but very, very good. They're both good, obviously, but I really love Elizabeth Gaskell. This made me love her even more. Definitely gonna read more from her in 2023. Okay, and then we also, let me see my list here. The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Obviously, loved this. Yeah, this is incredible. I've talked a lot about this already, but this is following Prince Mishkin, who is kind of like an impoverished person with like good, noble connections, and he's it ends up being like very much like a Dostoevsky soap opera, and you can really I've really fell in love with Prince Mishkin. I think he's a wonderful character, and really the meaning of this book is my favorite, I think, that I've read among Dostoevsky novels. Yeah, he's really acting out Jesus in the modern day and showing all of the difficulties that come along with that. Everybody calls him an idiot all the time. Nobody takes him seriously. He doesn't see much change as a result of his actions, and the ending would suggest that it's pointless. But I think that he still comes across very much as a Jesus character, and people were affected by that. And I just loved it. I thought it was so good. So The Idiot, highly recommend. Maybe not the place to start with Dostoevsky, because most people don't seem to love it as much as I did, but I really glommed on to Prince Mishkin, and I always find Dostoevsky hilarious. So I really enjoyed this whole thing. There are a lot of philosophical things to kind of get through, as is typical with Dostoevsky, but yeah, I loved this. It was really wonderful. So, okay, what is next? Let's go with The Secret Agent by Joseph Conrad, which I own. I could not find it, unfortunately, but it's this like small little book. Really amazing book. So this is following a group of people who want to be revolutionary, they're like anarchists, basically. And in London, it was published, I believe in 1900 is when it was published. Is that correct? No. I'm sorry. That was Lord Jim. So it was before that. But anyways, it was like close to turn of the century in England. And yeah, it's basically showing these anarchists pretty much getting what they deserve. So it reminds me very much of a Flannery kind of story. I thought it was brilliant and hilarious and also really heartbreaking and tragic, but in the way that a Flannery makes you laugh about it and also really think deeply about it. I found that The Secret Agent did that for me. And I think the philosophy can kind of bog people down for a while, and it did take me a long time to actually finish this. But for me, it was totally worth the effort, especially the second half moved so quickly. And the punchline is powerful, and it's so short. I feel like it's not a hard one to get through at all. So I really love this. I plan to read more Joseph Conrad, definitely, in 2023. I was supposed to read Lord Jim a couple months ago with Kate from the Literary Apothecary, and she went ahead and finished it, and I just was not able to finish it at the time. So, but that's okay. Hopefully I can finish it. Hopefully I can do that one this year, because I really loved The Secret Agent. That was a treat. Okay, so let's do Mansfield Park. This was a reread for me, and I reread this in preparation for Feb Regency so that I could like review it in Feb Regency. And Feb Regency is really like about Jane Austen's contemporaries, more so than Jane Austen herself, because we already obviously have Jane Austen July here on BookTube. But I was just having a great Jane Austen moment, kind of rereading some of the Jane Austens. So I like reread Persuasion and Mansfield Park. And Mansfield Park is just as wonderful to me as it always has been. It's my favorite Austen, I think. Again, because I'm more of like a serious person. Mansfield Park is following Fanny Price, who comes from a family who the mother married a poorer man than her family would have liked, and then her family cuts her off because of that decision to marry the man that she loves. And so Fanny comes from that family. She's been taking care of her siblings her whole life, and then she's brought in to live with her aunt and uncle because they hear that the family is really struggling monetarily and has a bunch of kids, and they just can't take care of them. And so they take Fanny in, and I just instantly fell in love with Fanny, and I would follow her anywhere. Like, she's like great disability representation, and she has a very strong strength of character, even though she's a very quiet, like kind of soft-spoken, sweet, very obliging type person. And she's very aware that she is a charity case, basically. Her family makes her feel that very strongly, and she knows it. And so I think she is really wonderful. It's amazing the kind of trials that the people she loves put her through. And I know the love interest is not a favorite with so many people, but I definitely don't mind him. I think he's a really good person, and I just love that. I love the match. I love it. I thought it was very wonderful, and I was completely satisfied by the ending. So I thought it was great fun. It's not, again, as witty and fun, I guess you would say, as some of the other Jane Austens, but I thought it was wonderful. So anyways, let's take a look at this list again. Okay, so A Single Shard by Linda Sue Park. This was a middle grade historical novel, and yeah, this one was great. I haven't read too much middle grade this year, but the ones that I've read were really good, and this was one of them. So this was I forget when this is set. It's, I don't even know what period it is in Korean history because I'm so bad at numbers, at dates. But anyways, it's set back in Korean history, and it's about this pottery maker and a boy who wants to become his apprentice and make pottery with him because he thinks it's really beautiful. Celadon pottery. It has this special greenish blue look to it that you could only find in pottery from that particular area, and they were famous for it. And so it's following the apprentice, and really wonderful book. I thought the ending was amazing. It was like a slow build kind of a book, and when I was reading it, I was like, is this really for kids? Like, I don't know, would a kid really enjoy this? But I instantly got a comment when I talked about this video from someone saying that they loved it when they were kids. So, and I know that Claire, Tiffany's daughter, Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia, recommended this book to me, and I know she said her daughter loved it. So obviously some kids would have been loving it. I think I would have been like, I need some swords and dragons in this book, but you know, we all have our tastes. So I really loved this, so I thought it was a great book. So highly recommend A Single Shard by Linda Sue Park. Okay, let's do Q-Teen 84 by Haruki Murakami, which I think I'm finally pronouncing it right. Also, I really planned to do a review of this one. I really did. Never happened. Regardless, this book I actually only rated 50% out of 100 because it had one very glaring flaw, and that was the writing related to women. If you've read the Dresden Files, it's worse than that. So there's a lot of talk about female body parts, and the main character, who is a woman, is very well developed as a character in the sense she's very interesting and driven and cool. She's cool, but she's basically a man in a woman's body, and the women's body part of it just made it feel like something fun for the author to describe, you know, all the different body parts. Like literally, she would just stand in front of a mirror and describe her body parts to the reader. So that really bothered me, but I really enjoyed the audiobook anyway, despite that. Yeah, so I gave it a 50%, but it's still on my favorites of the year because I really loved the atmosphere. I thought it was very engaging and gripping, and I really enjoyed it. And I plan to read more by Haruki Murakami, maybe with his short fiction. I've heard that maybe it's a little bit less of a problem as far as the writing about women. So yeah, I'm excited to read more from him in 2023. And it was about basically, the plot is really hard to describe but there's a parallel world happening. There's a lot of fantastical elements happening, and there's some kind of noir elements to it as well. And yeah, there's a lot of abuse portrayed. I can't really talk about the plot because it would totally just ruin it. So I don't know, if it sounds like your kind of thing, if it's intriguing you at all, try it out maybe, but just be aware there's a lot of body content, for lack of a better term. Okay, next we have Congo, The Epic History of a People by David Van Reybrouk, which is a book that I buddy read with Tom from Ellie Books, and I loved this. This took me like 6 months to read though, I had the ebook, and so I would have it read to me some of the time. I think it just takes me a while to read history books, but I love them. I'm so fascinated by history. I'm just very, very slow at reading it. That's okay. That's fine. This is really the history of Congo, and I had no idea about the history of Congo at all, but it was fascinating to hear about Congo pre-Belgium. There was kind of like a race to colonize different parts of Africa because of the immense quantities of natural resources in Africa. So a lot of like European countries, and I think America did too, also colonies. I don't know. I don't know if America did. Probably we did, would be my guess. Regardless, a lot of European countries colonized it, and Belgium got the Congo for a long time, and they like developed it as a nation in some ways, but they also held it back in a lot of ways, like not really training the Congolese people themselves in jobs that required high education and high training. So when everybody in the world suddenly decided that colonizing nations was wrong and they pulled out of the Congo, they pretty much they just left a mess behind them because nobody was really trained to take over this modernized country. And so it's talked about the political upheavals that happened after that and all the difficulties that the Congolese people have had as a result. So fascinating and very tragic and heartbreaking, and you just hope and pray that a nation like that will find peace, that they'll be able to eventually become stable as a nation. So yeah, fascinating, very, very interesting and good. Next, I want to talk about the letters of Flannery O'Connor, The Habit of Being, selected and edited by Sally Fitzgerald, who was a close friend of Flannery O'Connor's. And this is wonderful. I'm probably only 100 and something pages in. Yeah, I'm like 120, 19, 118 pages in. And I read this obviously for Flannery January, but I took my time with it because she was mentioning so many books, and I decided, okay, I have to read more. I have to read some of these books that she's recommending. And that's why I picked up The Secret Agent, was because she talked about having read everything by Joseph Conrad that she could get her hands on. And I was like, okay, I like Joseph Conrad. I want to read more of him. So I started picking up things by him. And that was a wild success. So yeah, I'm planning to read more of these for Flannery January 2023, which is coming. I really need to announce it. I haven't yet, I'm sorry. Regardless, I love this. I think she is so funny. So I have read letters by other people before. None of them were like this. This just had me cackling all the time. It gave me a lot of empathy for her because she was suffering so much due to lupus. And so Flannery O'Connor was a Catholic, and she died of lupus at the age of 39. And I have her prayer journal as well over there. Victoria sent it to me. Thank you, Victoria. And I find her wickedly funny and so spiritually mature. And it's just an interesting dichotomy, because sometimes you think of spirituality meaning that a person should be very kind all the time, and this one could bite. Flannery O'Connor could bite you, but I think honestly she also loved very deeply and was kind to her friends, but she just had a penchant for mocking things that deserved mockery that is very entertaining to me, while also being spiritually deep. So it's a wonderful combination. It's so readable and enjoyable. If you have not treated yourself to Flannery O'Connor yet, you're missing out. Okay, next. A Bad Business by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Of course, there are 2 Dostoevskys on this list. A Bad Business is a collection of short stories that I read with some of my favorite people here on BookTube. Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia, Kate from Literary Apothecary, Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads, and Evie from She Was Only Evie. I believe that was the group that was involved. And but there were some other people that also joined us, some subscribers. Thank you guys. That was so fun. What a fun readathon. What a fun collection of short stories. Now, I know that people say that Dostoevsky's genius comes through better in his novels. I know that some people have that opinion, but honestly, everything I read by him, I just think is brilliant and genius. And I know that some people really loved his short stories, and they're so much more accessible and approachable than his longer books. I think Crime and Punishment is accessible and approachable, if you're looking for that. However, these short stories are even more so. I found them entertaining, I found them meaningful, I found them wickedly funny again, and fascinating. I think Dostoevsky has so much empathy for brokenness, which is something that I always love in an author. And he does a wonderful job with that, because he was a very broken person as well. If you know anything about Dostoevsky, he was a mess, and he knew it. And so he had a lot of empathy for his broken characters, and it really comes through. And those short stories, man, they will keep you cracking. And so I read this collection. It was put out by Pushkin Press, and I think there were 6 stories in it. So you can look at the table of contents and get the stories free online, like they're on Gutenberg. But this new translation was great and very readable, and it's a cute little, like, tiny little collection. It's a really nice copy. So I got one from my library and highly recommend. Okay, next, let's go with Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather, another author that I meant to I definitely want to read more of her in 2023. If I could fit her in, more of her this year, I would have. But it's been a slow year for me reading classics and stuff. Like, I think I still did well, but really I've been focusing so much on Korean that there's definitely authors that I want to explore more, and I just have not had time. Including Dostoevsky. Demons, I'm really bogged down in right now. And I have readathons all the way up until the end of that one. So we'll have to see. We'll have to even see if I can really get into Demons enough to do it justice, because I need to be in a certain frame of mind to get through a long classic and enjoy it properly. Regardless, this one was short, which, as you can tell, short classics were something that I really enjoyed this year. They still take me a while to get through, but because they're short, I feel like, okay, it's manageable. I'll keep working on it. I'll just keep on chugging along. And I managed to finish short classics, and this was wonderful. So this is following missionaries to New Mexico, French Catholic missionaries to New Mexico. And we're really, so the Archbishop, I think his name was Jean Latour, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, because French pronunciation is beyond me. No idea. John? I don't know. Anyways, he is a very, like, spiritual type person, and a lot of people look up to him and just love him, and he's very kind and gentle and sweet and gracious. But he actually has somebody else that he looks up to, which I think is funny, and it's his friend from France. They both come together as missionaries to New Mexico, and his friend just has such a heart for the people, and he's very, like, earthy, and he really gets along with people very well, whereas this guy, the Archbishop, he has a kind of distance from him, from others. I mean, he just feels more distant, whereas his friend is, like, very vivacious, let's say, and can connect well with people just on a person-to-person level, no matter their class. And so they were very different, used in different ways, and I feel like the message of this book is pretty much like God can use whoever you are. And so it was just interesting to read from his perspective, because he was so humble, and, like, my friend has done so much more, is how he felt. My friend has done so much more for the people, and I just love him. And whereas everybody else is looking up to the Archbishop, instead of his friend. So it's just really interesting, and I feel like it's a really accurate look at the spiritual life. I feel like people who are Christian or Catholic, we're always kind of thinking of our brothers and sisters and loving them and how we can support them, and that's the way the body should work. We should be humble about ourselves and be ourselves, of course, because we're all unique tools in God's hands. But yeah, yeah, I loved that feeling of the body of Christ working together in this book. So good. The plot, the descriptions were amazing of New Mexico and of also the native populations. I felt like she did a really good job understanding the period. Is this a historical novel? I don't think she wrote it. I don't think she was writing about the time that this sorry, my camera turned off. Anyways, I believe that this book was set in like midway through the 1800s. Probably would be my guess. And it wasn't written then, you know, it was written quite a bit after that. So it's actually a historical novel, but also a classic, which is kind of cool. It's like really beautifully written. Very much more of a character sketch. It's not like plotted very heavily. So if you're in the mood for a quiet, reflective type book, like I feel like this would be a great one for that. As long as you know what you're going into, I feel like you can really enjoy it. If you're expecting something that's plotted heavily, then this is not the one to go for at the moment, if that's what you're wanting. So anyways, next, All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot, which I read for the Kindred Spirits book club that Kate Howe does, which I love. All of her book picks are just so like on point and wonderful. I loved this. This was another memoir in my year of memoirs. This is following a veterinarian. When is this set? I'm so sorry, I don't know all the time periods. I did a bunch of videos on it and I had the time period down, but I don't remember now. I think it was, okay. It was published in the 70s, it looks like. Maybe the 20s? I don't even know. So anyways, it's written in, about the English, it's actually not, I'm sorry. Okay, it's about a Scottish veterinarian. It's written by a Scottish veterinarian who goes to the English Dales, which is actually, he made up the community. It's kind of like a mishmash of all the communities that he was familiar with. The Dales isn't a real place. The people's names that he uses are not their real names. But he's sketching the community, and it's almost like a fictional nonfiction book, if that makes sense. Anyways, so basically, he is trying to treat all the animals in the English Dales, and falls in love with the area and with the people and with the animals that he's working in. And he has so many stories that are like very detailed, things that you wouldn't think about unless you like are a vet, you know? And it gets a little bit squeamish sometimes on the details, so keep that in mind if you're picking this up. But I found it riveting and also hilarious. Really, the way he writes it is part of the treat here. He has such a warm, empathizing, humorous, gentle humor about the people that he's working with, and I loved it. I remember reading somewhere that the author had told his wife, who he meets in the Dales, all of these stories, and he had a way of telling them that made her think, I think everybody would love to hear these stories if he published them. And so this is not the only one that he published. He published several books, and obviously there's at least two versions of the TV show, neither of which I really enjoyed, but I loved this, especially on audiobook. It was like perfect to listen to every night when I was falling asleep. It was perfect. So loved that. Highly recommend that, especially if you're an animal lover. There are some sad animal moments or some hard animal moments, or like some really stressful moments. Like there's in one case a calf that can't breathe very well because there's like a mass in blocking its breathing, and it's just like painful, you know, knowing that the calf is going through this. But the way he writes things, even though sometimes they are heartbreaking or difficult, the ending usually makes it worth it, you know. It always was worth it to me, and I was able to get through those moments, maybe just not listening to them at night, you know. So it was a relaxing read for me. Next, we have the Apothecary Diaries manga series, which I'm on volume 3 of right now. So you can't take my word for the whole series, but this is following an apothecary, a woman who used to run an apothecary, and then she is kidnapped and brought to a palace in Japan where she treats the concubines of the royalty and their children, and like there's several cases of poisoning that she has to deal with, and she's like a food tester for them, and whenever there's some kind of complaint they go to her for like some kind of treatment, and it's really interesting. Like I really am enjoying it, and it's just like a nice thing to relax with. This is my favorite manga series that I've ever read so far. Of course, I haven't read very many manga series yet, but this is just perfect for me. It's funny, I love the main character, she's adorable and smart and so interesting. I love it. So next we have The Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving, which is a short story that I read for Fastathon, and I read it with Tiffany, and both of us just thought it was hilarious and so good. I listened to it and then I went back and read it because Washington Irving is just a treat to read, right? He's so enjoyable. So this is a short story, and it's really about Tom Walker and his wife who meet the devil, and it's like a Faustian type story. So they exchange something for their deal with the devil. And it really kind of, it's a good indication of how the devil really works with people, because everything he touched, even if it looked successful, it just got worse when the devil was involved. And he also had Washington Irving made some really good reflections on America and how they were being very judgmental about Native American practices when they were doing their own, like slavery and stuff that was really bad as well. So he made some parallels there that were probably uncomfortable for the original readers. I'm not exactly sure when it was published. I should have looked that up. I'm sorry. Okay, and then we have The Red Palace by June Hur. Maybe this should be more of a runner-up book because I think it's not like a 5-star. I mean, I am saying it's one of my favorites of the year, but I think it's more of like a personal thing because on audiobook, it was such an enjoyable historical mystery set in Korea. We're following a nurse who's a very fun teenager. She's like an older teen YA is what it felt like to me. And we're following this teenager who's working as a nurse in the palace, and I was so gripped right away with the start of it because she's pulled into the prince's room and she is just told the prince is sick and he needs you to treat him, and everybody just needs to hear you say that. So she goes into the prince and it's not actually the prince, and so there's this whole mystery because a bunch of murders are being committed and the prince is sort of implicated. And so, yeah, it's really intense. It's actually somewhat based on a historical character. There was a Korean prince in South Korea who was mentally ill, and he was actually shut into a rice chest and killed by his father, I believe. Anyway, it's like this story in Korean history, and he became actually very popular after this. Him and anyway, it's like a whole story. So this story isn't really about the prince. It's really about the murders and the investigation of the murders by the nurse, and it's just really fun to live in this historical period. I don't even know when it's set exactly. Again, it's in the Chosun period, which is very large. It's a very long period in Korean history. But yeah, so enjoyable, so fun. Definitely a genre book. It's not a literary book at all. But I don't usually read mysteries, and I loved this one. On audiobook, I listened to it. I read some parts of it, and I enjoyed it reading it physically. But my friends who have read it physically, they did not give it as high of a rating as I did. So I feel like I would probably give this like a 70%, maybe a 75. I don't know. I just found it highly enjoyable, even though it's genre fiction. It's not gonna like blow your mind, but because I'm so interested in Korea, that I loved it. So read based on whether you think that would be fun for you. And another runner-up I had was Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie, just mainly because I loved the setting and I thought that the characterization was really fun. And basically it's about a family who is visiting, where are they visiting? I don't even remember. It's somewhere in the Middle East, maybe in Jordan or something. Anyways, they're visiting on this tour, and it's like the first vacation that this family has had, and it's a family of children around their mother, who is like a matriarch that's very controlling and manipulative. And when the mother dies, there's a big question of who murdered her. And it's just very entertaining and interesting. And again, a genre fiction read, classic of mysteries. I really enjoyed it. I guess it didn't connect with everybody, but I loved it. I thought it was great. That is it. Okay, that's it, guys. Let me know what your best books of 2022 were, what you're really looking forward to in 2023. What authors maybe, or series, or whatever. Love to hear it. Bye.